apologize. I was actually in the operating room doing brain surgery, and unfortunately it took a little longer than I thought, and I just ran over here. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Jim Doty, and I'm the director of CCARE, which is the organization that is sponsoring this movie this evening. What CCARE does, for those of you who don't know, is we are a center that's focused on understanding the neuroscience of compassion and altruism and the value proposition of those behaviors. And we do research in a variety of areas with humans, with animals, to understand these nurturing or caring pathways. And we have found that, of course, and geez, it's amazing it takes science to prove this, that when you're kind and compassionate, the world's a better place. Isn't that amazing? And the other interesting thing about that is that when you practice those behaviors with intention, your physiology changes, and it changes for the better. And the reason it changes is because when you demonstrate kindness, when you demonstrate compassion, you are reverting to what is at our core, what we evolved to be. And what happens, unfortunately, in modern society is so often that we were really never designed to be here. And we have created a system that doesn't necessarily nurture us, and especially now in the context of an aggressive form of capitalism that doesn't necessarily bring us together, but separates us. Many of us are stressed, have anxiety, and worry about the future. And I think the film we've just watched and what Marc has done has given us an understanding, though, that in fact there is reason for hope, there's reason for optimism. And I can tell you, just in the work that we have been doing over the last 10 years, we in fact are seeing a paradigm shift in how people see themselves in the world and how they want the world to be. You know, many of the young people today, especially with access to 24/7 information and also access to seeing the world and seeing the world as it truly is, which, remember, that means that they understand that 50% of the people in the world live on $2.50 or less per day. And they also see the gross inequality that exists in the world. And they're motivated to change it. When I first started the center, if you spoke about studying compassion from a neuroscience perspective or making that a focus of your life, frankly, you were laughed at. But what we're seeing now is that there has been a sea change in this attitude. There are now individuals all over the world studying this, and the reason is because when you act compassionately, you change and the world changes. And I think this movie we've just had the pleasure of seeing clearly demonstrates that reality and gives us great hope for optimism. What happens sometimes in the world, especially when you're daily buffeted what you perceive as negative, you have a tendency not to believe that. But I can assure you, in fact, that it is changing, and each of us, every day, has the capacity to improve the life of another person, to be kind, to be compassionate, and sometimes it's simply a matter of saying hello. And if we practice that, and each of us makes that effort, what you will find is that your world will change, and you will be a happier, more complete person. Because what our society, especially a capitalistic society, makes us believe is that by wanting more, by conspicuous consumption, that will make us happy. And the reality is, until you understand that happiness and meaning fundamentally relate to being of service and caring for others, you cannot be truly happy. And the world will, in fact, change when we see the other as ourself. And every action we do towards the other is a reflection of us. Because once that happens, you cannot look away. You have to be a participant. Without further ado, I'd like to bring Marc up, and he's going to engage you a little bit, and then Marc and I are going to sit down and have a little conversation. And I apologize for looking like a surgeon, but I am a surgeon. Thank you. Come on up, Marc.
So because the journey was a long journey, it was pretty dense with different topics. What we used to do in France is just to take maybe 1 minute and go back at the beginning and just doing the trip one more time, but just from India to Guatemala to France, and see how you feel after this movie. How do you feel by watching those people, watching those actions and all these landscapes, and just stay like, 1 minute with how do I feel, and what was the important sentence that I would keep for me before I leave the room. And outside is hostile sometimes, we forget. So let's take 1 minute just to ground this feeling that you can have after the movie and focus on the one important sentence. It's a huge responsibility to break such a powerful silence. Now the question, maybe the question will be different, because when you take the time, they do that in the Plum Village, like from Thich Nhat Hanh in this community. You have like a bell that rings every hours, and when it rings, everyone is in silence, and you take a deep breath, and then you continue what you're doing, and sometimes you change what you were saying, and even the question is different. So let's see.
You know, I wish I had a French accent.
No, and I apologize because we did like the voiceover in English, and it was still very thick accent. So
my wife would love me a lot more if I had. So did you want to have some questions asked, or should we talk for a few minutes?
I think you said some of the things I wanted to ask you on stage before.
That was my intention.
Yeah, so I think like at least we know, even if you had to leave because they are calling you for a surgery in emergency, I think the important stuff has been said. But either we can take like maybe a few questions, and from those few questions then we can also like answer to few of them in the same time.
Yes, there's a beautiful young lady here who I just sense that she wants to say something.
Is that when you working for a big corporation like that, and younger, is that how you got into?
Well, for Danone, which is not the worst, but there's still, Okay, so one question on food. Do we have like other questions, and we take all of them and then we package and we answer?
I wanted to thank you both for the work that you do. I don't work for a big organization. I'm simply an elementary school teacher, kindergarten, first grade teacher. So inspired by your work, and I've actually been doing a lot of compassion work and mindfulness work at my school. Though it's not as receptive as all the technology-based education that we're being forced to do, I just wanted to know how I could get a hand on your documentaries that could inspire my director to show it to our school as a whole, because I really think it starts at a very young age, and we need it more in the education field. So we can maybe later answer that.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just also, please don't diminish what you do, because what you do is probably more important than what all of us do, and that's to care for our children. So.
It's the youth, for me it's the youth and the women who are going to change the world, because they have not been so attached to this mindset that we just described, so I think it's very important.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
My question is in regards to advice on literature, that you were reading books that you were quoting individuals. There were 2 poets I heard mentioned. I'm reading Bhagavad Gita right now. I'm trying to learn Sanskrit as much as I can. But do you have advice on any literature that would be enlightening for me to read or for all of us to read?
Yeah, okay.
Personally, I've stopped reading. Like, I don't read anymore. I just realized, like, I had so much, like, to read for a time, and I watched so many documentaries that at some point, like, I do believe, like, there is inside us a person that knows everything, and the more you, sometimes even on a spiritual path, the more you read, and the more you do, like, even like a personal work, like development and workshop, that you feed sometimes even the mind and the ego, sometimes I believe, and I think sometimes, like, now I try to take away some of the stuff, that the most important stuff, as you said, the Bhagavad Gita and all these spiritual things, like, I've been infused with them, but now I try to not to read and see how it has been digested by myself and try to act out of this wisdom, because then you read. What I like about the person in the movie is, like, they are not philosophers. That means, like, they don't have concept, but the wisdom is the experience of the concept, and they are living their wisdom. And I feel more that instead of reading and keep, like, trying to figure out what is the solution, to live the solution in a daily basis. That's why I started this farm, like, where we do permaculture. We do also workshop for people who they can do yoga, meditation, and other stuff to, like, find their purpose. And I believe it was more about doing things than just reading. But then we can still give you some books that also, like, open my mind a lot. Yeah. But I think at some point you need information, and then you need to act out of what you think is the right thing to do and read less. So I'm not up to date to the top, like, literature stuff so far. Even if I think the old stuff, like the Tao Te Ching and the spiritual things you talk about, are still very accurate today. We try not. I think when we put the movie together, the hardest part was the voiceover, and the more authentic we were, the better the film was working. So I think that's also what they taught us about authenticity. So thank you. Was like other question or yes?
I'm prior military, and I survived an Iraq brain injury and PTSD. And you talk about compassion and more difficulty, and those of us that are veterans or served in the military, we now use mindfulness to help with our brain injury. As you saw in the film, it's so chaotic. In our brains, everything is so chaotic, and it's so hard to desensitize it. And so, but the first thing is for me, that you should instill was showing compassion in myself, because I wasn't able to forgive what happened to me. So I started showing compassion to myself and just being able to just be, and not try to fix everything, and accept my disability rather than be ashamed of it. And so I really appreciate your film. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your testimony.
And thank you for your service.
So what do you do now? After traveling, having fun, understanding some of the sites, the shift, what's your life now?
Yeah, it took time. That's the thing. Like, you don't have to quit your job, like, right after watching this movie. Because a lot of people then they said they quit, and then I need to work on this after sales service because it took some time. But making the movie took us like maybe 3 years to put all this material together because we were not professional. And after that, I worked with Marianne Sebastian, this woman that you see that works in Bolivia, working with women and empower women who used to work like in garbage or in the streets. And I saw like the power of like the inner transformation, like she's playing piano and she's make them think, and just by putting them like a bottle of wine and they start like, yeah, there is something that came out and they are like aligned. She asked them, what do you want to do now? I want to start a bakery. She gave them like microcredit with no interest. The only interest is to help a poor person after like you have the money. And because you quit poverty, I think, when you have dignity, and not by assisting, but by helping another one. So I saw all what she created. It's like 1 million people who have been helped with this woman. And I work with her, but I realized those people after that, they were autonomous. They didn't need me, so I had to find another career. And I work with Pierre Rabhi, which is the other man that you see that try to help to connect like agriculture and like people who wants to live a new livelihood where there is more in tune with intergeneration. There is autonomy, there is conviviality, there is mutualization of things. And I was doing that based in Paris. I was like, I tell people they should live differently, but I'm still based in Paris. So I decided to walk my talk also and to start a farm where we do farming and also like all this workshop where we take people who are like, before they do burnout or they want to find more meaning in their life, to experiment another way of living. So we take them 5 days and we do like meditation, dance, clay, and when you put 20 people in search for meaning all together during 5 days, they talk a lot, they exchange their experience, and they switch very quickly. Actually, I realized it doesn't take so much time to switch. It's just like going inwards and finding this and seeing you are not alone, to be compassionate. And when you see more people behaving with kindness, benevolence, you authorize yourself sometimes to do so. And that's what I'm doing now. So like I'm taking care also of these people, the animals, and the land. And as Satish Kumar said, he said like liberté, égalité, fraternité was for the French Revolution, but now we need a new trinity for our time, which is soil, soul, and society. So taking care of the soil, of our soul also, to find the courage, the creativity to act according to those new values, and then to give that to society. So that's what I'm doing now, and working on a new film also, because this one is like 2 years old now. And I think I have a new character for the next movie, because, and that's what I'm doing right now.
So I have 2 questions. I guess this mic isn't on. First of all, where is the film available so we can share it, tell others about it? Mm-hmm. And second of all, now that we've seen the movie, can we read the book?
So the movie in France, it was funny because we made it after it's only grassroots organization that promoted the movie. The movie was like founded on the internet, and everyone could organize screenings, and that's the idea of having those conversations inside our communities. And now we put it online, so the movie was available online for free. But when I entered in the United States, they told me like if there is no price, there is no value in the United States. So better like to still have an economy of it at the beginning, and then we can release it like in a different way. So we just had a distributor called Bullfrog who do educational distributions. We thought it was more important to be in universities first, because I think there's one generation that I've seen the bluff. They know this world is cheating on them, and they want a more authentic and better world. So we decided to focus on them. But we have also something called Tug, where you could, I think you need 20 people or 30 people inside the cinema, and then the screening happens, and then you can do it.
And what we'll do is, for all of you who are interested in showing it, we'll put on our website associated with this event how to do this, how to connect. And so if you want to show it or whatever you would like to do. What I was going to comment on, though, about reading, when you really dig into a lot of literature, especially religious literature, there are certain truths that are repeated over and over again. The challenge for all of us is that, unfortunately, the nature of humans sometimes is they don't understand or listen to history. And all of this information is there for us. And it's readily available, and it's free. And some of the greatest literature in the world has all of these messages. It's just that nothing happens until we listen to them. And this is the challenge, as you were talking about in your own experience from the military. Many people have been damaged and are suffering. And a lot of people in Western society especially every day beat themselves up and say they're not good enough, they're not smart enough, they can't do this, they can't do that. And of course, when you say never or can't, by definition, it's not possible. And so you have to liberate yourself from those feelings, and because there cannot be peace in the world until you have inner peace. And that's certainly one of the truths, and it's certainly something that science has shown us. And for those of you who may not know, We actually have a compassion cultivation training program, which we give at least once a quarter, and it's available to everyone. And it has been scientifically demonstrated it has a significant effect as far as decreasing your criticality of self. And of course, as you mentioned, when you're less critical of yourself, you're less critical of others in the world, and you understand that everyone is suffering. The other thing I'd just like to mention, how many of you have heard of the alphabet of the heart? So for those of you who may have or haven't, let me just throw this out at you, and it's self-serving on some level, so I will admit that up front. You mentioned dignity and compassion and self-compassion. And I went through a period of deep reflection on what are the types of values that would center me as a human being, not only as a physician, but as a human being and how to walk the world. And it came down to 10 letters of the alphabet. And I first shared this with a group of students who are about to start medical school. It's something called the White Coat Ceremony, which some of you may or may not know. And the reason I put into 10 letters so that it was a mnemonic that could easily be remembered. And so it's 10 letters of the alphabet. And I think it covers many of these issues. And the first is C, which is to have compassion for self and others. D, to recognize the dignity of every person. E is practicing equanimity or evenness of temperament. F is practicing forgiveness, because when you carry anger and hostility towards others, it only poisons yourself. G is having gratitude, and especially in Western society and capitalist society, we have a tendency to look at others who we perceive as having more instead of looking and seeing how many have so much less than what we're blessed to have. And when you're able to look at it that way, you have joy because you are blessed, not jealousy and envy because of what you perceive as you not having. You know, some of the most happy people and content people are people who have almost nothing because they're not striving to have something. And when you have that mindset, you have everything. And then I is having integrity and values that you live by. J is a concept of justice and fairness. K is kindness, acting towards another without any motivational desire to get benefit, and all contained by love. And if you go through that at least, I think, for me, sets my intention every day. Yes, Mrs. Doty, my wife's going to point out that I don't always practice this. Oh, do I have H? See, you know, I always forget H. Do you know why? Because it's humility. And neurosurgeons, by definition, are not humble, right? So I'm constantly working on that one.
That's where wives comes in to bring humility.
You see,
always, in general, the wife comes for humility.
But you know, on that point, though, you can always tell a good doctor. And the way you tell a good doctor is when he walks down the hallway to see patients, he knows the names of the nurses. He acknowledges everyone who takes care of patients, the person who empties the trash can, the person who changes the bed. And he sees them as a critical part of his success in caring for patients. And that's how you always tell who a good doctor is. Because, you know, a guy by the name of Francis Peabody said in 1925, the care of the patient is caring for the patient. And this actually comes back to fundamentally who we are. When we care with authenticity, then that changes everything. And what I found for myself, and I think, Mark, you would probably agree, is that when you change how you see the world, as an example, working for Avion, and then having an experience, how you change how you interact with the world the world changes how it interacts with you. Any other questions or comments?
So yeah, I have a question about the sweat lodge that you went into. It seemed like you briefly covered it, but there was probably a really big transformation that happened. I wondered if you could speak to that.
But the sweat lodge, after that, I did like maybe 50 other sweat lodge. So but it was the hottest one, I believe. I think when the Mexican shaman saw these two white boys coming, they wanted to make sure we were like resistant enough. So he really tried to boil. You know what the sweat lodge is?
Oh, yes, yes.
And no, it was very strong because actually that's what we say, like, when I was in this first, I didn't know what it was. It's like it was like this ceremony they do, like I think once every equinox, so it was a strong one. And I come into this sweat, and first it was hot, second it was hot, third it was super hot, and I was like, okay, I don't want to be there. Like what I'm doing with this like unknown guide, which is just like boiling me like a sausages, and I didn't see like the spiritual side of it right away. And at the end it was like, okay, now it's the fourth door. So it's the last one, it's the warrior one. I was like, and I wanted to go out, and he said, ooh, stay. And I look at my friend Nathanael, and he was like, I'm staying. I was like, ooh. So still we have ego, sometimes it's good. So I said, no, okay, of course I'm staying with Nathanael. And in this period, it was so hot at some point, I was like, what do I do? It's so hot. It's like, so sing. But I was, if it's too hot, but sing more like strongly. And then I was like, I couldn't, so I went on the floor, and really I felt how the earth was like still fresh, and how like my cells like were connected like to this earth, and like I'm just the end of the 4 billion like years that this continuum of life is happening. And like I saw all the bad reason for why I was doing the movie. Like I wanted to prove things to my brother-in-law. I wanted like to show I was right, because when I left, I tried to show those documentaries to all my friends from business school, and they didn't want to see them. So I saw like all the egotistic reason for why I was doing the movie. And when I saw that, I was like the witness of the ego. And from that, just like this time of release happened, and I was like, okay, so I'm not doing it for the good reason. And there was still a good reason to do it, but I saw all the bad one, I would say. And when I left, really, I felt so connected with the earth. I felt centered, and I really felt like there would be a before and an after watching my thoughts. Because when you identify yourself with your thought and with your story, like you're stuck. And once you realize there is another part of you, an higher self, that is just the testimony, the witness, from this opens up an entire new reality. And I think you allow a bigger part of yourself to come in this body, and then the inner GPS comes in, and then that's where really like the movie started, and like the movie started too, because it was like switch on, and then like a lot of connection happened, and like it was much more easier to find people. So I felt, the sweat lodge was like putting the fingers inside like the current, and like take like the 5 bars of Wi-Fi, and then everything was happening very quickly. So I think that's what they say in all the spiritual tradition. There is a discovery to do inside yourself, and this discovery is worth it, because then life like really change, and you stop feeling you are against the current, but you go with the current. And when you're connected with this intelligence that happened since like this beginning of life, something happened. And I do believe the universe is benevolent, and when you are in a line, things flows. That's why we use that as the conclusion of the movie. And it's worth taking the time to like calm down the mind, to be in touch with this part of ourselves that is the kind, the compassionate part of who we are. To uncover that is, sweat lodge could be good, but there is so many other ways to do it. But if you had a chance to go there, I give you the address. If you're ready to be cooked, it's worth it.
You walk away from the film thinking that capitalism and compassion are incompatible. Do you see any examples of how that could be changing in a positive way?
I think when you can combine capitalism and you change from a mindset of shareholder value to stakeholder value, then that's when things start changing. When your intention is not to maximally make profit, regardless of how it may hurt people, then I think things start changing. we have a subset of individuals who typically we have made CEOs of companies who are often ruthless and self-serving. And if you look at the nature of Wall Street, where you have quarterly earnings, people manipulate that for self-interest. And, how is it possible that the income of CEOs has increased, 682% in the last decade or so? We've never seen such a discrepancy between the lowest paid individual and the highest paid individual. And I think when companies start changing how they perceive their role in the world, then I think you will see a sea change, and everyone will benefit. But it will be a changing paradigm. What I find fascinating is you'll hear a certain group of people say that if you want to increase the pay to others or quote unquote redistribute income, it's socialism. But if you actually examine it, the middle class has been destroyed by their money from their work has been taken away from them for the rich to benefit. And that's not socialism. They have redistributed the income which allowed people to live a life, to have a home, to care for their family, so that they can enrich themselves. As an example, how is it even possible to believe that an individual can have a life on $7.25 an hour, right? And that's minimum wage. That was minimum wage 30 years ago or so. The minimum wage should be $22 an hour if you look simply at inflation. That's what people should get paid. If they were paid that, they could live a life. And this idea that somehow paying that will destroy businesses, do you know what it would do? It would allow for more equality, and you just wouldn't have, as an example, the bonuses on Wall Street being more than it would cost for all education in the United States in 1 year. I mean, how is that even possible, right? There's no problem in terms of money and resources, it's how they're allocated. There's plenty of money to end poverty tomorrow. It's the will, but we have to speak up and force that and believe that everyone has a right to education, everyone has a right to live at a minimum level, every child has a right to be fed. I mean, how is it possible in the United States we have the highest poverty level of any industrialized country in the world, childhood poverty? I mean, this is an abomination. So, anyway, that's my... yes, ma'am.
So the question is what happens if we reach this unbalanced?
I think we're at a tipping point, and I think that actually there is reason to be optimistic. When we talked about this idea of compassion and some of these other issues, when I got into this, we were discussing this earlier, this was not even an issue that was considered. It wasn't even worthy of study. And now there's a great many people who are interested in this and understand how important that is and that this disparity is not acceptable. And so I think there is reason for optimism, and I think that there's hope, and I think we can bring that balance back, but there will probably be some more pain and suffering before that happens. But it will happen. I think that's unfortunately all the time we have. Oh, we'll take one more question.
How did you decide where to go in the places that you showed in the film?
The thing with the movies, we didn't plan anything, which is the opposite of what I've been taught in business school and how you do a movie usually. So I was just called Nathanael, and he was like, I'm in India. And because we knew the world we didn't need growth, we needed wisdom. So we thought India sounded like a good place for that. So that's how I went to India, and then I went back to France, and my cousins was getting married in Mexico. And I was also how do you say, le témoin, the witness. So I had to go to Mexico. And so I went, and we did the same thing. I think when you have the intuition, a vision, and an intention, and you hold that together, then you can start traveling, And that's how people come to us. Let's say, like, you don't have the rational mind, you have to be with your intuition because it's different referentials. So that's how we went there. And inside the library of the Guatemala, we saw like books about noetic science. And so we were up, like, we called them, and that's how that happened. Really, like, traveling and being just open to what life, like, sometimes we had the feeling that life was taking us like a little Playmobil. Go and talk to this one, go and talk to this one. And we made a movie like this. So no planification. Sometimes it's good. Life knows what she's doing. If you go to the sweat lodge before. Then you don't get the reception, the Wi-Fi doesn't come in.
The Wi-Fi is available to all.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, listen, all of you, thank you so
Thank you.
much, and it's really been a joy. Sorry I was late, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you all again. And Marc, thank you so much for doing this, and I appreciate it.
James, thank you.